From a 50-year football curse to an unsinkable stewardess, today we look at unbelievable coincidences that really happened. Number 8. Curse of Bobby Layne. The world of sports has changed drastically over the course of the last half-century, but there has been one consistency. The Detroit Lions have not won a championship in 61 years and counting. And some say legendary quarterback Bobby Layne is to blame. Following an incredible 8 years with the Lions in which he led the team to 3 championships, played in 4 Pro Bowl games, and was voted first-team All-Pro twice, Layne was traded to Pittsburgh. Upon receiving the news, he supposedly responded by saying Detroit would not win for 50 years. And in many ways, he was right. The Detroit Lions have a number of records that are less than flattering, including the only team that has been in the NFL since 1970 and has never been to a playoff game, and the first team to have a winless record of 0-16 in a 16-game season. While the curse is supposed to be long over, the Detroit Lions have a steep summit to climb back to the top. Number 7. The Wreck of the Titan. 14 years before the sinking of the RMS Titanic, a novella written by Morgan Robertson detailed a similar journey and consequential sinking. The book, titled The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility, follows the story of a man named John Rowland as he drunkenly survives the voyage, iceberg crash, and return to mainland. A redemption story of sorts, the novella doesn't seem to be aware of its grave subject matter, but that doesn't mean the parallels between the two are missing. The Titan was 800 feet long and displays 75,000 tons in the novel, a size not too much heavier than the Titanic and just a bit shorter. Both the Titan and the Titanic were described as being unsinkable and having too few lifeboats. Both struck an iceberg at a pace of more than 20 knots. The ships had similar builds, number of casualties, and even shared the same propeller design. So when the Titanic went down in 1912, the world couldn't help wonder if Robertson was clairvoyant. He went on to claim the similarities were all because of his extensive maritime knowledge, not his ability to see the future. Number 6. Jennifer and Dominique. In 1987, Jennifer Bricker was born with no legs and put up for adoption. She was raised and loved by 2 compassionate parents in Illinois who would grow up idolizing gymnastics on television, particularly Olympic medalist and professional gymnast Dominique Moceanu. Growing up adopted, Bricker wasn't accustomed to seeing someone that had the same Romanian features as herself. That, combined with their similar size and stature and Moceanu's display of grace, Bricker became immersed with the idea of following the same path as her idol. With boundless determination, Bricker grew to be a gymnastic champion herself, refusing any aid or handicap that was offered. But there was more to find out. When Bricker was 16, her mother finally told her the truth about herself. Her birth-given surname was Moceanu. She immediately put it together and went about contacting her sister, stringing together documents, photos, and the latter. Bricker put all her faith in a single package, writing, "You had been my idol my whole life, and you turned out to be my sister." Shortly after, Moceanu received the package and was completely shocked. She called Bricker, and then they began the slow but gradual process of reuniting Bricker with her birth family. Today, the sisters are close and have shared their story through books, articles, and interviews. Number 5. Laura Buxton's. The mind of a 10-year-old can run rampant with imagination, but young Laura Buxton didn't make up this story. Just ask her new friend, Laura Buxton. Confused? So were the Lauras when one of them received a deflated balloon with her name and address on it. The balloon was found hanging from a hedge by a neighbor, who promptly delivered it to a friend's child whose name just happened to match the one on the balloon. The message on the balloon stated, "Please write Laura Buxton." And so the girl did, and to her delight, she received a phone call not too long after from, you guessed it, Laura Buxton. What had happened was that one girl named Laura Buxton had sent out a balloon in search of a pen pal. The balloon had traveled 140 miles and ended up, of all places, at another Laura Buxton's residence. The 2 girls, less than 1 year apart in age, learn that they have more than names in common. Both have similar hair, grades, and pets, even the same number and breed. Number 4. Steve Jobs' biological father. The co-founder, longtime chairman, and CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, was known for many accomplishments as one of the greatest computer-age pioneers. However, what many may not know are his origins. Steve Jobs was adopted. Born to an Arab-Muslim father and a Swiss-German Catholic mother, an infant Jobs was put up for adoption in San Francisco in 1955. His parents, in their early 20s at the time, were forbidden to marry by Jobs' biological grandfather on his mother's side due to his heritage and religious beliefs. So Jobs would grow up with two Bay Area blue-collar parents who he would grow to cherish. Fast forward years later, Jobs would go on to meet his biological mother and sister. He grew to know and care for them, but he never had much of an interest in meeting his father. Little did he know, he already had. When he and his sister Mona Simpson found their father, Jobs decided his sister would go to meet him alone. He was a balding Syrian man who had quit teaching to run a restaurant near San Jose. Upon meeting, Mona would hear him say that, quote, all of the successful technology people used to come there, even Steve Jobs. Oh yeah, he used to come in, and he was a sweet guy and a big tipper. Hearing this, Jobs recalled visiting the restaurant and meeting an owner who looked a lot like himself. But Jobs was completely unaware of their familiar relation at the time. However, out of caution toward his wealth and status and respect for his foster father, who he regarded as being his parent 1000%, Jobs would never seek out another meeting with his biological father. Chandali learned years later of his biological son's identity thanks to articles he read online. Number 3. Miss Unsinkable. Born in the late 19th century, Violet Jessup was a natural-born survivor. The first of 9 children to a family of Irish immigrants, Jessup spent a vast majority of her childhood looking after her brothers and sisters. Only 6 of the children survived as illnesses ran rampant, with Jessup herself becoming a case of tuberculosis, which she survived despite doctors' predictions of a fatal diagnosis. At age 16, Jessup's family moved to England after her father's passing. Her mother worked away at sea, and Jessup would attend school and look after her younger sister until her mother fell ill. Taking after her mother, she would apply to be a stewardess and earned her first position aboard the Orinoco in 1908 at the age of 21. But this would only be the beginning of her trials. Jessup would go on to work for the vessel RMS Olympic in 1910. A luxury civilian liner, the Olympic was the largest of its kind at the time. On September 20, 1911, the Olympic collided with the British warship HMS Hawke. No fatalities were reported, and Jessup and her crew were able to take the ship back to port without sinking. Her next shipwreck encounter wasn't quite as fortunate, however, as Jessup boarded the Titanic in 1912. 4 days after it left the harbor for its first voyage, the Titanic hit an iceberg and sunk in nearly 2 hours in the North Atlantic. Jessup was loaded into a lifeboat where she was handed a baby to look after by one of Titanic's officers. By the next morning, Jessup and the other survivors were found and rescued. She reported in her memoirs that aboard the lifeboat, someone who she presumed to be the mother took the baby from her and walked off without saying a word. Jessup would later work as a stewardess aboard the HMHS Britannic for the British Red Cross during the First World War. In November 1916, an explosion that remains unexplained to this day tore through the ship, sinking it in 55 minutes and causing 30 fatalities. As the Britannic went down, large propellers began to churn and suck lifeboats under the stern. In a desperate attempt to escape the sinking ship, Jessup leapt from her lifeboat, suffering a traumatic head injury but surviving the wreck. Jessup would go on to live a long life and died at the age of 83 in 1971 with the well-earned nickname of Miss Unsinkable. Number 2. The Jim Twins. Twins in fiction are often portrayed as having similar or shared minds, taking their similar likeness to an exaggerated level even when separated by birth. In the case of the aptly named Jim twins, reality became stranger than fiction. In 1940, 2 twin boys were put up for adoption at only 3 weeks old and split across Ohio by 2 different sets of foster parents. Both would be given the names James by their respective parents, each going by Jim for short. Both men had childhood dogs named Toy. Each excelled in math but did poorly in spelling. And it doesn't end there. By their adulthood, both men had married twice, and each first marrying women named Linda, only to divorce and marry women named Betty. Each of them had a son named James Allen and were Chevy driving officers, with one working as security and another as a deputy sheriff. And to top it off, they were both heavy smokers. It was 37 years until the two were reunited, spending their entire lives only 40 miles apart, yet living such similar lives in the meantime. The two decided to take part in a study and found the twins to have nearly identical medical histories, as well as extremely similar brainwave and personality tests. These reports have gone on to heavily influence nature versus nurture theories in the case of heredity and environmental effects on human behavior. Number 1. The Girl from Petrovka. When Anthony Hopkins first found out he was to play a lead role in a film based on the George Pfeiffer novel The Girl from Petrovka, he was eager to begin his research. Traveling to London to purchase a copy of the book, Hopkins would go from bookshop to bookshop, but to no avail. He could not find a copy of the novel anywhere. Awaiting the underground train home, Hopkins would happen to find a book underneath a bench, completely full of annotations. As luck would have it, this just so happened to be the book he was looking for, The Girl from Petrovka. In the midst of production of the movie 2 years later while filming in Vienna, Hopkins would actually meet the author, George Pfeiffer. During their visit, Pfeiffer commented that he had lost his copy of the novel being adapted. He had lent it to a friend to read, and they ended up losing it in London. Without hesitation, Hopkins would hand the copy he had found 2 years prior to Pfeiffer and ask, "Is this the one?" To their astonishment, it was.